Hello, everyone. Welcome to the part one of the International Christian University Linguistic Colloquium, as known as ICULINC. I am Seunghun Lee from International Christian University. Today, we have two exciting talks by Yurie Hara from Hokkaido University and Osamu Sawada from Kobe University. So before going further, let me introduce the first speaker, Yurie Hara from Hokkaido University, currently an associate professor at Research Faculty of Media and Communication there. Dr. Hara works primarily on semantics in Japanese and Cantonese, and today she's also talking about German a little bit. Her previous research uncovered new insights into evidentiality, modality, as well as semantics of questions. Dr. Hara graduated from University of Delaware, and she's also alumna of ICU Linguistics, graduated in 2001. She also presented her research or share her research at the Asian Junior Linguistic Conference a few years back. And it's very nice to have you back, and welcome to the ICULINC today. Yurie will talk about a game-theoretic approach to diachronic trajectory from causal to conditional in Japanese and German. Welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me share my slides first. Okay, it's thank you for having me. It's very nice to come back to my alma mater, even virtually. Let's get started. Okay, so I will talk about this. Historical linguistics of causal to conditional semantic shift. Okay, whoops. Yeah. So I'm going to focus on this construction, so the eba form that I'm going to call. The a is the verbal suffix and ba is a particle. And this, in old Japanese, it has this causal meaning. So it goes like this. Kurushiki koto no mi masareba, ito ito omoi wa bitaru o. And as I indicated here, this eba means because only harsh things interestingly happened. Koi was very much depressed. Koi is the lady right here from Tero Genji. And this translates to modern Japanese like this. So, 辛いことばかり増えていくので、行為が大層ひどく途方に暮れているのを。So now, not eba form, but this no de form is used. Okay. But this eba form is also used in modern Japanese as well, but it doesn't mean causal, but it means conditional. So let's look at the modern Japanese example first. 恨むのが最もな点も可愛らしくぼかして言えば、それにつけて男の愛情も増すことでしょう。Okay, so eba is here. And then it translates to even the things you definitely hate, if you just mention them sweetly, men will love you more. So it's a if marker, not the causal marker. All right. And this is a translation of this original old Japanese text. So, 恨むべからん不死をも憎からずかすめなさば、それにつけて哀れも勝りぬべし。So in old Japanese, the if is marked by aba, not eba. So there's difference between a and a. And this eba form also has another meaning. It got another meaning in Middle Japanese a little bit later. So the example is this. なりものに怯えぬもあれば、怯える子もあろうし。So probably some kids are not scared by a loud noise, and some kids are scared. Okay, so I'm going to call this use as logical or symmetric conjunction, because if you switch around the clauses, the two clauses, you get the same condition, because this is like logical or symmetric, and so in logic or P and Q and P are equivalent, so the order doesn't really matter. So that kind of conjunction. So I'm going to call it logical conjunction or symmetric conjunction. Okay. Now, well, this is a conjunction, but so basically the eba shifted from causal to conditional, and this pattern, interestingly, also happens in German. So in German, this is the same morpheme. It's like a dialectal or phonological variance of the same morpheme then in modern German. It's a cognate of English when, by the way. So there's causal Vende or Van or Ven in early New High German, which from used during this time period. Okay, well, unfortunately I'm not very good at early New High German, so I cannot read this to you. But the point is, well, let me read the English translation. So furthermore, a holy vessel escapes from you because you get your future enemy from him. So this that van is used to mean because in the old time in early New High German. But in modern German or modern High German, there's the same morpheme, although there's a little so van changed to then now, but it's the same morpheme. It's so I cry with you if you lost a friend of yours. So it's marking conditional clause. So there's same. It's similar to Japanese. Its meaning shifted from causal to conditional. Yeah, so we have this Japanese eba morpheme goes from started out as causal meaning and become conjunction, and then in modern Japanese it's conditional. In German, this van, der, van, and wenn started out as causal meaning and shifted to conditional. So the research question of this project is how did this V eba in German van der van wenn they shift from causal to conditional? Okay, well, I mainly talk about Japanese because that's what I have. I recently started to look at German. Well, it's strikingly similar though. Let's talk about Japanese eba. Okay, this eba and aba contrast is actively discussed in traditional Japanese grammar as well. So for instance, in Sakakura, this suffix is called mizenke, or unsettled or irrealist form. And a morpheme is called izenke, a settled or realist form. And as for ba, they assume that it unambiguously marks conditional, so it's always means conditional. So this combination aba is called katejoken, so irrealist form plus conditional, so it's really the hypothetical conditional. And eba is because it's a settled or realist form combined with conditional marker. It's called kakutejoken, settled conditional. But in modern Japanese, this aba form has disappeared. We no longer use this form. And for some reason, eba used to be kakutejoken, settled conditional, but now it took over this aba's function. So eba works as katejoken, hypothetical conditional. Now, this pattern has been discussed by many scholars, and Kobayashi's explanation of this path from causal to conditional goes like this. So phi eba psi in Old Japanese, because A is this settled marker, it denotes settled conditional. There's a condition, that means there's a conditional dependency between two settled propositions. Phi and psi both settled propositions, there's a dependency, and that leads to a causal meaning. The two facts connected by conditional, and then becomes causal meaning. And the causal dependency between phi and psi is generalized over time, like if because it rains, it is cold, those instances are accumulated. And then it acquired hypothetical conditional middle in case it's raining, it's cold. And at the same time, for some reason, so this A used to denote a settled proposition, but for some reason this feature is lost. So now it's not a settled proposition, but it's a hypothetical form, this A morpheme. So it's actually going opposite. It used to be settled, but now irrealist or unsettled, totally opposite meaning, opposite function. I always find this explanation unsatisfactory because it's not clear what motivates this generalization process of the causal EBA into the conditional. Especially, we already had in old Japanese, there was a ABA conditional, which looks like a genuine conditional. And then why is this subtleness or realist feature of A lost? It got totally opposite meaning, unsettled or irrealist form. It's quite mysterious. So that's puzzle one. And a puzzle two comes from like a general trend about historical linguistics. So Traugott and Dasher's generalizations of language change says that meanings tend to become increasingly subjective. It's more about the speaker's epistemic knowledge. And also increasingly procedural. It becomes more about the utterance than about the content. In other words, it becomes more like a meta language level. So to give you a concrete example, let's look at this English sentence. So A is like a basic usage of the because marker. So John came back because he loved her. So the fact that he loved her caused the event that John came back. So it's a content level meaning of because. It becomes more subjective in A-B. So John loved her because he came back. So this is like my knowledge, the speaker's knowledge that he came back. The knowledge caused the speaker to conclude that John loved her. So this epistemic knowledge caused this conclusion. So it's an epistemic level of causal meaning. And it can go one step further to one step more meta level. So it's a speech act level. So what are you doing tonight because there's a good movie on? So this is like, because there's a good movie on, it's actually modifying a speech act or question. I'm asking this question because there's a good movie on. So it's the causal meaning is modifying the speech act. So this is like general trend. So that as the time goes, it acquires more procedural and more subjective meanings. Okay, going back to causal to conditional. Well, causal statement, like if it snows, it's cold. Well, it's not if because it's raining, it is cold. It's about the speaker's judgment that there is a causal dependency between two facts. There are two facts, it's snowing and it's cold, and I'm making my judgment that one causes the other. So it's more subjective and procedural statement. On the other hand, conditional statement is a quantification over event predicates. Like in all these events where it's raining or it's snowing, in those events, it is cold. So it's more about general statement. It's not about the speaker's judgment. So it's less subjective and less procedural. Now the EBA shifted from causal to conditional. So it's actually going the opposite direction. It's becoming decreasingly subjective and decreasingly procedural. So my second puzzle is that, well, this is not like, I know it's just a trend in historical linguistics. It's not a definite principle, but it's going against this trend. So the EBA's path from causal to conditional goes against the general trend of semantic change. So that was the puzzle of the traditional grammar's approach. Okay. Now I'm going to present Fukuda's analysis, which I think I assume is right. It's a right approach. I will build my analysis based on this. So Fukuda says that in EBA construction, the particle ba in Old Japanese is actually ambiguous, unlike traditional grammarian assumes. So for him, aba is the ba in aba is conditional, and ba in eba is conjunction, not conditional. And the verbal morphemes a and e, they are not markers of realist or irrealist, but according to Fukuda, they are markers of syntactic positions. And Fukuda is not a generative linguist, so I translate his analysis in generative terms in the following. So A is syntactically lower, so and I'm going to assume that it's a marker of aspect head, which is minus finite, which directly takes BP as its sister. And semantically, it denotes event predicate or unsaturated proposition. It's not a full-fledged proposition, but it's a predicate. On the other hand, A occupies plus finite C head, and the CP denotes a saturated proposition. And the difference between the two, I already indicated here. A can embed modal, but aspect phrase modal cannot go here. And this can be shown in the corpus study. So I look at the corpus of historical Japanese. And so this mu, lam, and kem are modalities in Old Japanese. And there are no instances, 0 instances of ma, lama, and kema, but there are a lot of me and rame and keme. So these forms are attested. So A can embed modal, but I cannot embed modal. And I have an example of me here from Tale of Genji. So 物はな君には過ぎにたるよその覚えはあらめと。Although there might be some rumors that it is too much for a humble person like me. Okay, so you can have modal under a morpheme. Okay. So it's not really, it shouldn't be a settled or realist form. Actually. Yeah. So to summarize, in Old Japanese, eba denotes a conjunction of two saturated propositions, two facts. And aba is the real conditional. It's a genuine conditional. It denotes a quantification over event predicates. In those situations, in those events where it's raining, it's cold, that kind of quantification. And this syntactic difference is also, again, going back to German, it's quite similar to the German contrast. So remember, so in Old German or early New High German, this van means causal. And if you're familiar with German syntax, German is SOV language in the sense that the verb comes final, verb final language, but that only happens in the subordinate clause. In the subordinate clause, the verb comes at the end of the clause, but in the matrix clause, so in the generative term, it's supposed to move to the C head, so it comes to the second position, the verb second, so after the subject. So if the verb is in the matrix, if the verb is in the second clause, it's a matrix clause. If verb is at the final position, then it's a subordinate clause. So now with the van, the verb is this one, so it's the second position. So it shows that it's a matrix clause plus finite, and it is a saturated proposition. It denotes a fact. On the other hand, when when is used as conditional, the verb comes at the end. So it is a subordinate clause. So we can say it's it's minus finite. It's like a below VP. And it denotes semantically, it denotes an event predicate. It really parallels what happens in Japanese. All right. So that was Fukuda's analysis plus German fact. So let me present my own analysis now. So my first proposal is that, so I propose the semantics of the V-EBA construction as a sequential conjunction in the sense of update semantics. So formally, C is a context. And when this sentence is interpreted by every psi, what it does is the C is updated by the content of phi, and then this post update context is further updated by psi. So let me draw a diagram. So we have context, which is a set of possible worlds. And then we learn the proposition phi. It take intersection where the proposition phi is true. The possible, we only take the possible worlds where phi is true. So now context is updated by this. So this part is the C updated with phi. And then now further updated by psi. So like this, so this part. Okay, so this part is C update phi, update psi. So what EBA does is this, like updating with the context with phi first, and then after that we update the context with psi. So why am I saying this? Well, there's actually a example from older than Genji Monogatari, Tale of Genji, Taketori Monogatari. So let's look at the example. それを見れば三寸ばかりなる人、糸糸を美しゅうていたり。You look at it, and then there was a person who was only 3 inches tall, sitting very lovely. So there's a EBA form here, and then there's Oji-san, the old man here. He looked at this bamboo shoot, and there was a little person sitting inside, looking very lovely. Okay, so here it's phi above psi is doing is it's really sequential conjunction of events in chronological order. He looked at the bamboo shoot, first event, and then he found this little person. Or there's no causal relation between two events, just phi and then psi. Okay. Now, how do we get the causal meaning, as we have seen in the very first example? My proposal 2 is that the causal meaning of EBA is an I implicature. So it's a pragmatically arise meaning. So 黒式ことのみまされば here I said that it has causal meaning, but it has the semantic interpretation, the lexical meaning of EBA is just and conjunction. So what it means is only harsh things increasingly happened, and she was very much depressed. And this gave rise to I implicature. So I implicature is like the hearer interpret more from the simple marking, supply more information. So only harsh things happen. Therefore, she was very much depressed. So because only harsh things happen, she was very much depressed. And this phenomenon is known as conjunction buttressing, a term by Levinson. So like John turned the key and the engine started. I implicate John turned the key, therefore the engine started. Because John turned the key, the engine started. So this happens at the pragmatic level. How about conditional meaning from this sequential conjunction, this can be obtained by an update of a suppositional or hypothetical context. So this is the meaning of EBA that I propose. So if this C is the actual context, that's update of the actual context, but this C could be hypothetical context. So we have actual context, and then we make a copy of this hypothetical or suppositional context, and then there we update with phi, and then update with psi. So when this C becomes the suppositional or hypothetical context, we get this modern Japanese style conditional interpretation, if phi, then psi. So going back to this modern Japanese example of EBA, 恨むのが最もの点も可愛らしくぼかして言えば、okay, so if you just mention them sweetly, like let's suppose hypothetically, in those hypothetical contexts, you mention those things sweetly, and in those hypothetical contexts, men will love you more. So that's about hypothetical update. All right, and so the basic meaning is a conjunction, and along the diachronic development, morphemes marked specifically for causal and symmetric conjunction have emerged. So kara, which means because, and to, which is a conjunction, appeared around the 17th century. And the node, another because marker, started to be used in 19th century. And I have some plot here. So in the middle period, this EBA was used most of the time. And those kara and node was zero occurrences, but in early modern, it's more used in early modern, and EBA is rarely used as causal marker. And for conjunction, again, EBA was used most of the time, and there are a few instances only to, but now to is used more, and there's also tara is quite prominent, and EBA is very rarely used as a conjunction. And my third proposal is a conditional meaning arises from Q implicatures. So the conditional meaning of EBA obtains from Q implicatures. So this means a scale of node and EBA. So node is because, and EBA is the sequential conjunction. Because cos phi psi, or 5 causes psi entails, it's stronger than if phi then psi, but phi and psi, if phi then psi doesn't entail phi causes psi. So that means this node or this cause is stronger. So if the speaker decided to use the weaker form, then that implicates, Q implicates the stronger form is not true, not cause phi and psi. And similarly for to and EBA, phi and psi, logical conjunction entails if phi then psi, it's always true if phi and psi is true, it's always true if phi and then psi. But being phi and psi being true doesn't guarantee the truth of phi and psi. So again, this to or phi and psi, it's stronger. So if the speaker decided to use the weaker form, that implicates that the stronger form is not true, not phi and psi. So that's why we get the conditional meaning from Q implicatures. Okay, and here's this the plot of how the interpretations of eba changed over time. So in Manyoshu period, it was mostly used as conjunction or cause, but in the modern time, it's more used as conditional. And well, there are some cases of cause and conjunction too. But there are differences between modern, well, not modern, but this is still Edo period. So there's a shifting from causal conjunction to conditional. Okay. Now, so the conventional meaning of the eba is to mark a sequential conjunction, but the eba could mean, as we have seen, causal meaning, conjunction meaning, and conditional meaning. So, well, the speaker can be lazy. The speaker can say eba all the time, but the hearer has to do a lot of job, has to use contextual information to disambiguate the old Japanese speaker's meaning for a successful communication. So, well, this what he said eba, but does he mean causal, or conditional, or conjunction? There are a lot of work to do for hearer. Okay, and also we can schematize the steps of changes like this. So for causal to conditional path in old Japanese, we only have eba form, so it's a zero cause stage. And then in the mid-Japanese period, this node form is started to use to denote causal meaning. And then in modern Japanese, it's a categorical stage. So no, they always mean because, eba always denote conditional. For conjunction to conditional path, we have again zero lexical conjunction stage that we always use eba form in all Japanese. And immersion logical conjunction stage where to is started to be used to denote conjunction. And then in modern Japanese, it's categorized as to denotes conjunction, eba denotes conditional. But what's interesting is that we seem to be moving to another step. So to can refer to conditional. So to is actually embedding this area of eba to denote meaning of conditional. What do I mean? So to has this conditional usage too. So in 18, so this is modern Japanese example. Nonbiri shiteru to okureru yo. So here's to here. And literally it means you take time and you'll be late. Well, actually English has the same interpretation, but this could be understood as conditional statement. So if you take time or if you take too much time, you'll be late. And this is known as conditional conjunction in English. And well, you can do the same thing in Japanese. This and is used as a if marker, conditional marker. Okay, so I want to analyze this cycle using Dio's evolutionary game theory. So this grammaticalization transitions, the recruitment stage is that what people are using eba all the time, but some people started to use another form to denote one of the meaning, and then it's been categorized. The previous no they refers to because, eba denotes conditional, and then the last step, the to started to denote conditional. It's generalized, it's taking over the other meaning as well. So this is a generalization step. So Dale says a semantic grammaticalization path in the functional domain must be structurally underpinned by some privative contrast between the specific and general meaning. So there's we can have two kinds of context. One is a phenomenal context where we talk about special event tokens, like specific events. So in our case, the causal meaning is discussed in the phenomenal context. And the other one is structural context, where we talk about general event types. So what happens in general? So in our case, it's conditional meaning should be communicated in the structural context. And this context is modeled as a probability distribution over the state or meaning space. So we have two meanings, causal and conditional, that we want to communicate. And we have two contexts. One is phenomenal context, the other is structural context. So I say it's a probability distribution. So in a phenomenal context, we are more likely to talk about causal meaning because we talk about specific events, so it has higher probability than conditional. In structural context, now we should be talking about more general facts about the world. So it's more likely about the conditional meaning being expressed. And we have two linguistic forms, node and eba. Okay. Now, a speaker strategy is modeled as a function from a pair of context and the meaning to the linguistic form. So the speaker has some information that he wants to communicate, and he has to use the linguistic form. So that's the output. So we consider 4 strategies. So in CD means context dependent strategy, where the speaker is lazy and produces EBA all the time. So for the hearer, she has to be attentive to the context and choose whether the speaker meant cause or conditional. Okay. A partial context dependent strategy is the speaker now, to avoid misunderstanding, decided to use node when he wants to communicate causal meaning under structural context. So structural context is about general event. So it's more likely to be talking about conditional, but actually in that particular time, the speaker wants to communicate causal meaning. So to avoid a misunderstanding, the speaker decided to use node form in this particular case. Okay. The EM is a explicitly marking strategy. So it's a categorical stage now. Maybe I should change the color here. So now it's just, well, now the speaker ignores the context, and for causal meaning, use node, conditional meaning EBA, cause node, conditional EBA. Okay. The last one is similar to the first one, except that the speaker just now use node all the time. So it's another context dependent, but with the form node. Now the here strategy is the function from the pair of context and the message to the meaning. So the speaker receives the linguistic form and also understand the context, the current context. So against the context, we are given this form and try to understand the intention of the speaker, the meaning. So it's similar. So in the context dependent case, the speaker could be lazy, but the hearer has a lot of job to do, because she has to be attentive to the context. So now the speaker, the hearer doesn't have to look at the form, but just depending on the context, if it's phenomenal context, well, just understand its cause. In a structured context, understand it as conditional. But in the partial context dependent context, then the hearer started to be attentive to the form, only the structural context, and assigns this causal meaning. And the explicit marking context is just similar to categorical case. So just look at the form, ignoring the context, just directly map the form to the meaning. And then we don't need this for the here strategy. We don't need this one because it's just same as the first one. Just look at the context, ignore the form. Now, so to explain this diachronic shift, Dale introduces this idea of mutation. So learning, the children learn grammar from parents, but the learning is subject to mistakes. So offspring, so children might learn strategy B from strategy A. And then there's this equation, replicator, mutator equation so this is the new grammar of the offspring. And then this is the parents' strategy, and how, well, with this game-theoretic idea, we can understand how the population of the grammar has changed over time. Okay, so let's look at the recruitment transition from context dependent, just look at the context, to the people started to look at the context and the form, partially context dependent strategy. So linguistically, what this means is the local disambiguation efforts started. So some clever person started to think that, okay, to avoid misunderstanding, we should we should employ some other form to denote a particular meaning. So that kind of process happens. So this is innovating a new grammar. Okay, so for this, this is offspring strategy. No, not offspring. This is, oops. I can't delete this. Anyway, oops, what's happening? So parents, and these are offspring. So what we are looking at is the parents have this context-dependent grammar, but move to partially context-dependent grammar. The probability of it is 0.06. So with this, so I made animated chart. So let's look at this. Yeah. So this first, the red line is the. Well, I can't write this. Oops. The red line is the context-dependent strategy. So it was 1.0 distribution, and then partially context dependent strategy. This green line takes over after some 20-something iterations. So this one wins at this point. So that's this stage. Okay, now categorization transition, like using a explicit marking strategy. So now it's this probability, and okay. Yeah, so now after this green one takes over, this blue one comes up, and then it takes over at this like a 40-something iterations. And the generalization transition, this non-biri shiteru to okureru yo case, the top marking gets a conditional meaning. So this is what's happening here, the increase in the frequency of to in the offspring input. So children started to hear to more often. So they are more likely to mislearn that to is so often used. So it also probably marks the conditional as well. And there are more evidence for this context-dependent strategy than explicitly marking strategy. So to implement this, they will manipulate the probability here from originally 0.3, 0.03, but now when it get higher probability, it's manipulated to get more higher probabilities. So what's happening here, the learners are biased towards a form-wise simple. So the speakers are lazy, try to use just one form, which is more context dependent, rely on grammar. Okay, so now it's this. Yeah, so after the blue one takes over, then the purple one comes up, and then it wins. So compare so this one is the without manipulation. The explicit marking one is quite stable, like this blue one stays with the higher frequencies. So if we don't have manipulation, we always get the, not this one. We always, we will end up having the explicit marking forever, but with manipulation, we get this context dependent one as a winner. All right, so that's the end of my talk. So to summarize, Japanese EBA has so the semantics, a conventional meaning of EBA is a sequential conjunction, see updated phi and then updated by psi. And the causal meaning in Old Japanese is obtained by an I implicature. And the conditional meaning in modern Japanese are obtained by Q implicatures. So in this, I explain this meanings as pragmatic phenomena. So it suggests that this could be universal, at least cross-linguistically attested. And indeed, as I show some German examples, this German Van has this same causal to conditional shift. And before I finish my talk, let me, well, I have a lot of remaining questions. So what happened to the ABA conditional? I totally ignore ABA in the latter half of my presentation. And this ABA seems to be, we can find this in modern Japanese, like taraba and naraba, which is shortened to tara and nara. But actually, tara and nara are also argued to be derived from tareba and nareba. So tareba becomes taria and naria with the palatalization, and this palatalization is dropped, and now tara and nara is. There's convincing evidence for this pattern discussed in Matsushita. And also, how do these other forms of conditionals interact with the diachronic development of EBA? So we have a lot of different conditionals, actually. They should interact with this game-theoretic interactions. And also, what is ba in EBA and ABA? Well, Fukuda said it's ambiguous, but there's also a convincing evidence that this ba is actually derived from topic marker, wa, which used to be pronounced as pa in Old Japanese. So aba is argued to be that it's derived from pa. So this is the model that we have seen. And there's rendaku, the sequential voicing, and becomes ba. And probably eba is coming from epa, and there's another rendaku going on here. So there's interesting things going on here. Yeah, okay, so that's the end of my talk. Well, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. We have, let's give an applause, clap using our reactions button. We have some questions already. The first question will come from Osamu Sawada, Kobe University. Please unmute yourself and ask question.
Okay, thank you very much for the interesting talk, Hara-san. I have a very small question on the Japanese to, conditional conjunction to, which is on page 43, I guess, and slide 43. So, yeah. It's like an example was like もたもたしていると遅れるよ example. のんびりしてると sorry, yeah, のんびりしてると遅れるよ. So I understand that in modern Japanese, I mean, to is conventionalized as a conditional rather than the simple conjunction. Is that right? I mean,
from what I read in Kobayashi, I think it's derived from to doji ni to. So yeah, that's how it got this. So in modern Japanese, you can only connect to acts as conjunction only for noun phrases. Right?
Yeah, noun phrases, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you.
Yeah. So it's
yeah.
So if it's coming from to doji ni, then or I don't know, doji is Sino-Japanese, so I think it was a different word. But anyway, yeah, there are a lot of syntactic restrictions and so on. That I'm oversimplifying this. Yeah.
I see. So yeah, I don't have any intuition about all Japanese, but at least historically, to was only used for the it's like a real conjunction, meaning and, right? What?
I don't know the fact either.
Okay. So
I think this usage is recent. So it comes from to doji ni.
Okay. I see. So you are, so that kind of meaning, conditional meaning is no more general programmatic meaning. That it's more like a conventionalized specific special morpheme for conditional. Is my understanding right? Or are you still thinking that it's like an implicature, like it's still an implicature, which comes from todojini or something?
It's not. I think it's a conventional meaning, lexical meaning.
Okay. In that sense, it's different from other conditional markers, or I mean, EVA or is like still have a implicature. I understand. Or
so for EVA, what I claim is that the lexical meaning is well, I don't know. In modern Japanese, we may say that it's already conventionalized too, but at some point in the history, its meaning was conversational implicatures, because there are other meanings that specifically mark for because clause appeared in that. At that time, it was still a mere conversational implicature, but now it became the real lexical meaning. It's grammaticalized.
Okay, I see. It's grammaticalized. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sawada Sensei. The next question, we have time for one question. All right, One more person, Satoshi Tomioka from University of Delaware will ask the question. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question about this conjunctive use of eba in modern language, modern Japanese, which is like things like お酒を飲む人もいればワインを飲む人いました or お酒を飲むこともあればワインを飲むこともあります type eba. So I think it's this conjunctive use. I find it very interesting because it's specifically non-sequential conjunction. It's a conjunction that have no notion of temporal sequence or any kind of event sequence, and it somehow survived in that particular form. Is that something that you would expect?
Right. So I guess I should identify some forms. What what do we use when we want to communicate sequential, like chronologically ordered events? There should be one, right?
I don't know. I mean, it's strange to me that, I mean, it's so interestingly that it started as sequential, but somehow conjunctive meaning, the one conjunctive means that survived through time in modern time turned out to be non-sequential, and that I find that particular part of this historical journey quite intriguing.
I see. Yeah. So I guess what I can say for my proposal and framework is that there is a very specific linguistic marker that denotes chronological order. So that one takes over the meaning. So if we want to communicate chronological order, we have to use that form. That's why EPA doesn't work for that meaning, or EPA doesn't have that meaning in the modern Japanese. That would be my explanation.
Okay, thank you. This concludes the first talk of today's colloquium. Let's thank Yurie Hara one more time. And the recording will now be stopped.